India has one of the highest levels of gender inequality in labor force participation. 3 decades or so, this constant deterioration of labor force participation has been taking place. From 1993, when the overall female labor force participation was around 30%, we've actually come to a 20% around about 2019. So we've actually already in the middle of a sharp, steep decrease, right? Which means almost 4 out of 5 women in that paid labor force participation concept of paid labor force participation were already not in it. From the data that we have at hand, men would spend about 52 minutes of housework and women would spend about 6 hours. So we already started the pandemic around that. But what is going to happen is there is less possibility of women going back to employment. The ones who have come out of employment, there's going to be less women who are going to then be post-pandemic actually be employed back. And this will happen for multiple reasons. One, of course, those jobs have evaporated. The second bit of it is because our gender norms as such, when there are 2 people who are unemployed and there is a likelihood of one person getting an employment back, it's likely to be the men whose employment is going to be prioritized over women's employment. The other bit of it is in terms of education. Girls being restricted from mobility, or being doing more housework and all of that. So the gender disparity there will continue to increase. And when you're also looking at sort of virtual, looking at online classes, most households, even more affluent households like ours, have a set number of laptops, mobile phones, and all of that. And who's going to then have access to that? It's going to be the boy over the girl if there are multiple children in the household, right? So again, there's going to be likelihood of more gender inequality. We're seeing this globally. This is not India specific also. We're seeing that phenomena globally, that this is going to happen. The third phenomena that's happening, women are having to take on more of the household work as well, manage their work in sort of the formal labor force or even in the informal labor force. Because of this situation, is that there is a very high level of violence against women, right, that is actually taking place, right? Especially domestic violence, but there's also large mental health issue that's going to be unspoken and really not kind of talked about at all. So that's what we will end post-pandemic. It is going to set us back in terms of gender equality targets by many years. So what we do, we primarily work with other organizations. Some of our work is around research. The second work we do is around collecting evidence from organizations in terms of what is there, what is happening. So we do gender audits and organizational assessments and getting people to kind of look at data for their own organizations itself. The third that we kind of work is for those organizations which are interested, talk to them about and work with them in a long-term manner to think about what are the gender norms that exist within their organization, what are their organizational culture, and how can they actually develop a roadmap for themselves in terms of having enhanced gender equality. And we always say that's just a work in progress. We're also developing sort of courses for organizations and individuals also. The way that we want to amplify our work is not by being present in every single muhalla and every single city. And we know that there are lots of great civil society organizations and NGOs, especially women's rights organizations, which are working across states, across cities, at the village level. And we want to be able to support those organizations in their strategic thinking, in their strengthening of their outcomes, in their strategic planning processes, in terms of building leadership capacities, especially around feminist leadership capacities. We did just finish a mapping in the first 3 months in terms of understanding what kinds of domestic worker support organizations exist. And we've been working with funders to kind of get them to think about what kind of support do these organizations need to expand their work. The other work that we're doing is there are sectors where there are very high levels of women, right? Like tea plantations, right? So we've already working with organizations who are working in the tea plantation sector in terms of the laws that exist in India, right? The labor codes that exist, the maternity benefit that exist, the Plantation Labor Act, which is now possibly defunct or changed or morphed into the new labor codes, but all of that to kind of get them to start thinking about. So what we are doing is we're providing support to the local organizations who are based in these northeastern states. One of the work that we've been actually doing quite consistently has been actually strengthening these civil society organizations and women's rights organizations to have a stronger impact on gender equality. So some time back, we worked with 4 organizations in Uttar Pradesh, right, and helped them pilot ways in which to increase women's access to the NGNAREGA schemes. Policy around NGNAREGA is actually saying that there should be more women, the 50-50 or at least a minimum of 30% depending upon some states and whatever the central government current guidelines are, right? However, within that, you will see that Muslim women and Dalit women get left out more and more. So we did a whole series of work in Uttar Pradesh in 8 districts, and the data was kind of quite stark and just increased by 400% in some of those districts in terms of the employment of Dalit women. Similarly, we've actually worked with Education International. This is global, not India specific. So we actually work with the teachers and teacher education systems for them to develop action plans. And we work in 7 countries, probably 9 unions, to actually get them to think about developing action plans both at the union level but also at the school level, right, in terms of how to reduce school-related gender-based violence. And again, the results from that have been pretty gratifying. We covered almost 1 million teachers through those programs. In some countries, we've also managed to increase women's leadership within the unions. There are multiple things that each of us can do. One is equal share of household burden, right? I'd urge all men in terms of to think about what is the household burden, and also not just the physical labor, but the emotional labor of managing a house, The second is, thinking about it in the organization itself, right? In terms of any organization, thinking about how you run your meetings, who's speaking up, what is the gender equality division within the organization itself, who's even within the gender parity, even if you do, who is it? Is it like we also know that, particular castes, class, people from particular areas are underrepresented in those organizations. So keep reflecting on your own power hierarchies that exist within the organizations, and how are you using your power to actually make sure your organizations are more gender equal, right? And the third is the interactions with workers. And I mean within the organization, but also as workers in your household, right? And that this can extend, right? Now, when you're looking at gender equality, think about your contractual workers, think about your consultants, think about your vendors, right? So don't kind of think about gender in the workplace as this small office space, but think about it across your value chain, right down to the farmer on the ground. If you can extend that, or wherever that your value chain ends, think about gender equality across the entire supply chain. And if you're, for example, looking at a COVID response, right, then making sure that the COVID response is gender responsive, right? So very basic things that we've seen, right? If you create a response kit, right, उस response kit में शायद to kind of think कि sanitary napkin है कि नहीं, right? As basic as that, right? To think about कि अगर if you're setting up vaccination camps, just doing at least a data check, if nothing else, doing a data check on how many women are coming and how many men are coming to those, right? And if not, then making sure that can you do a bit of an extended campaign to bring women to those vaccination camps.